Hello, welcome to my workshop. My name's Kevin Lewis. I am a developer advocate for Vonage, previously Nexmo, and we are going to cover how to build your very first Facebook bot using one of our APIs, the Messages API. Now, I think Facebook's a particularly interesting platform. I think it has really wide appeal, especially with people who are slightly less technically confident. A lot of them use Facebook, and this would be a really good opportunity to engage with them meaningfully. I'm going to build this project in JavaScript, and it's going to be just a very straightforward application. People will be able to send a message to a Facebook page. We will store those messages, and then when they type in a special keyword, I think we'll use replay, or we'll pick the word later, we will show all of the messages that they have got to date. I'm purposefully keeping this quite simple in terms of the technical implementation, so you can see how our API works and then build your application around it. So let's get started. Oh, actually, before we do, I just wanted to explain a little bit about how I'm going to run this stream. So I'm obviously talking here. I'm going to go down into the corner in the moment. I have what I think will be up there in the corner is a little box, and when I type in notes that I want to be persistent throughout the whole stream, they'll appear in that box like so. And I'm watching the workshops and talks channel in the Discord. So if you have questions, feel free to post them in there. I'm also going to be watching the chat on Twitch, though that's physically a little further out of my view, so the Discord is preferred if possible. I believe this is being recorded, so you'll also be able to refer back to it later. I'm going to try and take my time, try and take things quite slowly, give you time to work along if you want, but if you have any questions at all, I'm in the Discord. My username is _phzn, and I'm here to help you out in any way that you need. So let's just kind of introduce the tools that we're going to use for this. So if I go over to this, hopefully you should now be able to see my screen. So a little bit of an introduction. I work for a company called Vonage. We're a cloud communications platform, and we allow you to integrate messages, voice and video into your existing applications. We have a set of SDKs and helper libraries. So hopefully, regardless of the language you're using, we should have a tool to help you use our APIs. And if we don't, as long as you can make an HTTP request from your application, you should be good and able to use our tools. So what is important here? You're going to need a few things in order to take part in this workshop. You're going to need a Vonage API account. I'll talk you through that in a moment. I'll give you some credit for that. You're going to need a tool called ngrok. ngrok allows us to take applications running on local host ports on our own computer and give them a publicly accessible URL, which we can then make available to the Vonage APIs, but also make available to the rest of the world. We're also going to need a spare Facebook page. I'll talk you through this a little bit in a moment in more depth, but I've created this fake page here that I just use for testing's sake. So you're going to need your own page as well, but we'll run through that in due course. So what's important? Yeah, you're going to need a promo code. If you head over to the workshops and talks channel inside of the Discord, I've just posted a message in there. Feel free to use that promo code for some credit, and it will get you surprisingly far. If you're working on projects and you seem to be running out of credit, please reach out to me and I'll try and help you out there. So let's kind of set everything up now. Just so you know, I've kind of got these several spaces going on. Over here is my code editor. There's a little terminal on the side that I will toggle on and off at various points throughout this stream. And I think now's the time where I'm going to go and set up our environment. So I mentioned ngrok. I've obviously already got it downloaded and installed. I'm going to get that started. So I'm going to actually just do that in a new tab, because once it's fired off, we shouldn't need to touch it unless there's a problem. So I actually have my ngrok in this directory. So you type in ngrok HTTP, the HTTP port we want it to listen to, and the application that we're going to build in this code editor, we'll run it on port 3000, and you can just run it as is. I have a pro account, so I can I can pick my subdomain, but yours will be randomly generated. Take note of what that is. Keep it open in the background, and yeah, you can always refer back to it later. I've noticed a question saying, will this video be in YouTube? I've been told this workshop is going to be recorded, so I'm not sure where it'll end up living, but you should be able to refer back to it later, which I assume is the actual thing you're asking. So we've now got ngrok running in the background, which means our localhost, the application running at localhost port 3000 is now accessible on that ngrok URL over in that tab. Next, we're going to go and create a Facebook page. So if you head over to, it's always risky opening your actual Facebook. I tried to set up a new account. I wasn't able to for the sake of demo, so I'm going to try and breeze through this quite quickly. If you go to facebook.com/pages, you can go and create a new page down here. I seem to have found community or public figure seems to ask you fewer questions. It asks you for a page name, hit continue. There might be a couple of extra steps. Don't feel the need to upload images, don't feel the need to fill in a ton of information. You just need the page to exist. Now I've got this page that I made earlier on, and this will be the one that we're going to utilize throughout this workshop. The only other step in order to kind of link this to your Vonage account is to head over to what is the URL? messenger.nexmo.com. Oh no, I'm buffering. Oh well, sorry. If there are things I'm missing in particular, feel free to ask questions, and I'll try and recap things that didn't quite come through. So you're going to want to link your Facebook page to your Nexmo account. I'll show you how that looks. You select your Facebook page, you put in your Nexmo API and secret, and then hit subscribe over here. You don't need to worry about this application ID for now. And that will link that page to your Nexmo account. So your key is here, your secret is over here. I am obviously not going to show you my secret, but the secret is over here. And you'll just need to put those in that form. Someone's just noted that I am behind the chat. I know I'm behind the chat. Sorry, that's just the nature of live streaming. I am in the past. Okay, so now we've created a Facebook page. We hopefully have signed up for a Vonage API account. Feel free to use the promo code again that I put in the chat. That promo code will also lift the restrictions on your account, so you should be able to use all the APIs freely at that point. And we've linked our new Facebook page to our account. I've already done that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new application. So over here in your applications, we are going to create a new application over here. We can give it any name we want. So I'll call this Hack Quarantine. And we're going to turn on messages. And we're going to need to give it a couple of URLs. Now, the status URL will be hit every time that there is a message sent to our Facebook page to this application. So we're going to go ahead and put in our ngrok URL, and we'll push it towards the status endpoint. Now, this endpoint doesn't exist yet, but take note that we are going to have to create this. And then there is also the inbound URL. Now this is the URL that is hit every time we receive a message with the actual contents of the message and all the metadata related to receiving that message. So we've done that over there. Finally, we want to generate a public and private key pair. So we're going to click this button here, and we'll notice a private key has been downloaded. I'm obviously not going to open that, but these are a set of keys. We are going to need to include our private key in our application. Now that's gone over to my downloads folder here, and I'm just going to drag that over to my project folder. So we can now see that that's over here in our project folder, like so. So we've set up our application, we're going to generate the new application, and that should be good. We've created the application. It has the ability to accept and send messages using our messages API. We have an inbound URL. We have a status URL, and we can link it to a phone number, but we're actually going to link this to an external account. And here is the Messenger account that we signed up, that we linked to our Nexmo account just a moment ago. So I'm just going to hit link. Oh, something went wrong. Very interesting. I think it's because it's already linked to an application. Bear with me. I'm actually, because there are secrets and things flying around this dashboard, I'm just going to put over a little overlay, and I'm just going to quickly check why that's happened. Live coding never quite works. Yep, that was it. That was exactly it. It was already linked to an application. You may have noticed I already had an application in my account. I deleted it, and I was able to link this straight to this new application. Now, I think that is all of the things that that's all the things that we need to do in this dashboard. Next, we're going to do a little bit of boilerplate code in order to get started. So, we are going to create a new package.json file. We don't really care about all of these questions, so we're just going to pick all the defaults and type in yes. And that has generated this package.json file like so. Next, we're going to install a few dependencies. So I'm going to type in npm install, and I'm going to install Express and Body Parser. Quite standard packages for creating web applications with Node.js. Next, I'm going to install the beta version of the Nexmo Node library, which is what you need in order to use the Messages API, which is currently a beta product. And I'm also going to install NEDB, which is a very lightweight database, which I'm going to use in order to store messages and then recall them at a later point. So we're going to go ahead and install those. We're just going to wait patiently and listen to the music. Okay, that didn't take long at all. Fabulous. Right, we're going to create our index.js file, and this is going to be the file where we actually write all the code for our application. So we're going to set up the kind of most basic Express application we possibly can. So we're going to create a new app, and we're going to require Express. We are going to include Body Parser. We are going to make sure that we are using Body Parser with our new Node application. And we're going to just enable one of the Body Parser like encoded settings. This seems to be just a general requirement for building applications of this type. Ask me why at a later point in time. URL encoded, extended, true. I'm actually just going to pop this over here, and I might just close the sidebar for now because we shouldn't need to fiddle with any other files. Oh, now we've done all of that. Yep, all of that looks fine. We are going to just listen on port 3000 like so. So this is kind of the most basic Express application we can build. All of our kind of application logic is going to go in here. So I'm not sure if you remember, but when we created our Vonage API application, we gave two URLs. One of them was a status URL, one of them was an inbound URL. So what we're going to do now is just set those up again, the most basic handlers we can, and then we're going to print inbound messages to the console and just check all of that works. So whenever we get a message, it's going to submit a post request to inbound. And all of the contents of our kind of, well, inbound message is going to be at rec.body, like so. That's all we need to do, but our APIs are going to keep trying to hit this endpoint until we give it a 200 OK HTTP code in a response. So we'll keep trying to make sure that we do actually hit an endpoint successfully. So let's say, okay, fantastic, this is now successful. Okay, we are going to copy and paste this, and we're going to create a parallel endpoint for status, because they are the two. So again, status will keep being hit until we return something. So we're not going to do anything with this endpoint, but we do need to create it. So at this point, we are going to run our node application. That everything should run fine. Famous last words. Okay, fabulous. And we are going to go over to our Facebook page. I downloaded this little desktop messenger application because it saves the risk of people popping up and posting me messages that they don't want made public. But I'm going to try typing something in. Hello world. And hopefully, there we go, in our console over there, we've got a few pieces of information. Let's quickly run through this and talk about what these different properties mean. So every message has a unique identifier. We have the to object. Now this is the ID of our Facebook page. In fact, if we go back over to here, somewhere in here is the page ID, and they match up. So that is our unique ID for the page. Then this is the unique ID of the person who sent us the message. So this is something we're going to want to store as their unique identifier. Then we also have a timestamp. Was a text type, and the contents was hello world. So everything's going fine so far. Slightly worried that wouldn't work, but of course, why wouldn't it work? That, brilliant. Next, we're going to move on to, actually storing these messages somewhere. Is it possible with pages, or is there a user messages endpoint too? I believe you can only do this with Facebook pages at the moment, because it's the Facebook page that you authenticate with our service. I will just double check that at the end of this stream and get back to you if I was incorrect. But assume that was right, and I'll tell you if I was wrong at a later point in this channel. Okay, so we also included an AnyDB package, and as I said, this was an incredibly lightweight database. You could initialize any database technology you want here, or fire off to a third-party service such as Airtable or FaunaDB or whatever. I've picked the path of least resistance. So I'm going to create a new data store. I'm going to create a new variable called a data store, and that's going to be an AnyDB instance like so. Come on, Kevin, Butterfingers, data store. And this will have a file name of messages.db. And this will be a file that exists on our computer. And we're also going to set this to auto load, so we don't need to also load this file in. Okay, I'm going to crack on, even though I understand there's technical issues. Also, maybe turning down the music might help. I can do this. This is... Okay, it's still there. It's about half the volume. Hopefully that helps. Yeah, having this chat open is actually... background in the music in the background is confusing. You know what I'll do just to save any headache is I'm just going to stop the music. So that should have just stopped there. Okay, right. So what have we done? We've initialized AnyDB. We've created a new data store. And now in this inbound message handler, we are going to insert the message that person sent us into this new data store. So to do that, we go messages.insert. This has very MongoDB like syntax. So we are going to just push in the whole body. We're not going to cherry pick data, though of course you could. You can manipulate data in here. Oh, some extra brackets there. So we're going to insert rec.body. And then the callback, and then we have a callback function. The callback function, if there is an error, we are going to just console log that. And if there isn't an error, then we will just console.log the data._ID. I might call this doc just for clarity. So what does this do? It inserts a new record into the messages database. The contents of that is just going to be this whole object here. Once it's done that, we trigger this function. If there was an error, we'll say there's an error, and if not, we'll just log the ID. So I'm going to restart the node server now, and we're going to try replicating that. You know what would generally help? If you save the file. Let's do that again. Okay, and there is a document ID. What that has actually done, if I open up the little file explorer over here, is there's a file here called messages.db, and this actually just stores the objects straight away in here. I'm just going to take a quick look at the chat. Me and my friend are getting, if something went wrong, please refresh the page and trying to make a Vonage account. Please wonder if you could look into it after the workshop. Absolutely. I'm not going to pause the workshop to do it now, but I will do it afterwards as you have requested. Okay, great. So we're now storing messages over in this database. Remember, we still must respond with a 200 HTTP code. Otherwise, this will continuously hit this endpoint and enter lots of items into our database. Next, we're going to work on responding to the user. Right now, there is no real indication that this was successful, even though obviously it was. So we're going to work on that next. So we are going to include the Nexmo library in our application, like so, and we're going to initialize that library. Now, there are 4 pieces of information that you need to include in this kind of options object. The first one is your API key. Now, you can grab your API key in your dashboard. I have mine stored in an environment variable, so obviously I don't need to live stream my key, but that is just stored in here. Next, you need to provide the API secret. Exactly the same deal here. I have stored this in my environment variables, but you can just put a string straight in here while you're building your hacks. Next, we put in our application ID. So if I go back over to the dashboard here, the application ID is just up here. And then finally, we can provide the private key. Now this should be a path to the private key file. Now it's in the same folder we're in, so we can just use this notation here and show that where the private.key file is. Of course, this means you can rename this file as long as it matches up here. You can put it in directories as long as the path, the relative path, is provided here, and you can actually provide this just as a string as well. So this is us having initialized Nexmo. Brilliant. Next, we are going to create a helper function in order to send messages. So I'm going to just call this function send message. We're going to want to say who the recipient is. I always struggle with that word. I don't know why I chose that word. Recipient. Yes, that is typed correctly. The sender, which will be us, and the text that we want to send. Now, we have to form a few objects here in order for this to be successful. The first one we're going to create is called to. So this is an object that will describe who we are sending the message to. This object has 2 properties: a type, and for us right now this will be messenger. Messenger, yes, I'm going to keep doing that, just checking I've typed things correctly, and an ID, and the ID here will be the recipient that we will pass into this function. You may ask yourself why this is necessary and why I can't just pass in the ID directly, and that's because the API that we're using also allows you to send SMS messages, Viber messages, and WhatsApp messages, and possibly some others in the future. So specifying the type is required for that reason. Next, we are going to create the from object. Looks very similar, the type, so this is going to go from a messenger page, and the ID will be the sender. And then finally is the message itself. Now, there are multiple types of messages you can send via Messenger. We are going to stick with just text for now, but you can provide more multimodal messages as part of this. So this object has a content object within it, and the content is going to be a type of text. And the text will be this variable that we pass in here. For clarity, I might just rename them. I'm not going to rename this message because this one's message. Message to send. There we are. And this one can also be message to send. Like so. Great. So we've got a to, a from, and a message. Each one is an object. They look structured correctly. So now we are going to go ahead and send that. So nextmo.channel.send. This takes four parameters, 3 mandatory parameters, an optional 4th parameter. The first one is to, which is an object. The second one is from, which is an object. The third one is message, which is an object. And then finally, there is a callback function. Just for kind of ease of reading, I'm in brackets, so you can kind of tell that that is a function. I said object, I meant function. So this one will trigger at the end. There is an error parameter that may or may not be there. You can do fancy things here. You might want to send data back to the user. You might want to do other bits, but right now all I'm going to do is console error. It's console.error, the error, should there be one. I'm stringifying it because it sometimes comes as an object in a way that is a bit long for the terminal, so I'm just stringifying it, but you can just put error straight in here. Okay, so what have we done here? We have set up our Express application, set up our data store in an instance of that called messages. We've, when there is an inbound message, we insert it into the database. We've now just included the Nexmo library. We've initialized the Nexmo library with all of the relevant information for our application, and we've set up a send message function. This step isn't necessary, but I like abstracting this out into its own neat function because it means that we don't have to keep creating all of these objects every time we want to send a message. We can just call this function instead. And then finally, over in this messages.insert, let's actually do something with it. Let's start with when it is successful. So thank you very much for your kind words in the chat, by the way. I see you. I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm actually going to take this break while I've lost concentration. Just look at the chat. Can't seem to find documentation for the specific thing you are describing. The API for individual applications like Facebook Messenger. Can you advise? Absolutely, I can. And I will take just a break to do this. This is called the Messages API. It exists down here. Here we are, Messages and Dispatch Beta. This is Messages. Messages is, yeah, as described here, one API, multiple channels. Fancy flow diagram, so you know it's legit, but we have multiple channels in here. I'm just going to pop this over in the Discord for that person who asked the question. Okay, let's continue from where we left off. So we have successfully inserted this message into our database, or we have done a while ago. Now let's actually do something with it. Let's send the user a message to tell them that they were successful. So we are going to send a message. Send message, as we know, takes 3 parameters: recipient, sender, and the actual message to send. So the recipient is going to be in rec.body. Let's just open this up and refer to hang on. The recipient is the from, so that's from.number. So .from.number. Is that correct? Oh, these are SMSs. That is not correct. Why is that happening? Later me will figure that out. Why are they SMS? That's really bothering me. I will figure that out later. I didn't think that was the format though, because over here it is to.id and from.id, not number. That was my little inkling that something went wrong here. So let's change that to from ID. So that's going to be the recipient, the person who sent us the message. Then there's going to be the sender. So that's going to be rec.body.to.id. So that's the ID of the page that they sent their inbound message to. So that's us. And then finally, the message to send. We'll just keep this short. Got it. Thanks, mate. Because obviously that's how we refer to people over our Facebook bots. Okay, let's just test that works now. Okay, let's restart this application. Let's go back over here. Let's type in test. Everyone's favorite test message. Okay. All right, yeah, that's great. Got it. Thanks, mate. And as you can see here, I should be very clear what's going on here. I've just figured it out. This is our inbound handler, and this is our status handler. You'll notice here we get submitted, delivered, and read. We get read receipts as well, which can be quite interesting. Now, the reason this is interesting, I'm just going to do a quick tangential thing here. We have an API called the dispatch API, and it has what we call failover, which means that let's say, for example, we know the message was not delivered, or now try and do something else. Maybe now try WhatsApp, or now try an SMS, or it was delivered but not read, and you can then kind of create workflows around being able to send stuff across different channels, if that makes sense. Okay, right. At this point, just because I don't want all of those console logs each time, I'm just gonna nip this console log out, so we won't be getting all of those logs every time. Someone is asking, is this being recorded? Yes, is the answer. Do I know where it will be live? Yes, because I scrolled up very slightly. It's going to be at hackquarantine.com/YouTube. So that will happen at some point in the near future. But we got a message. I forgot to celebrate that. Whoop, we got it. That's fab. We probably also want to send a message to someone when it is not successful. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to copy and paste this, and we'll say something like, sorry, there was a problem. Not going to test this because my applications always work. Okay, so that worked. I'm pretty happy with that. The last thing I think we should do, and I said we would do at the beginning, is we are going to, if they send us a certain message, we will go and grab all of the messages that user has sent us so far, and we will return it. We will return it to them like a log of what they've said. This itself obviously isn't that interesting, but I just kind of want to show you how we can conditionally do different things based on inbound messages, and then you can figure out all the clever things that will save the world on how to implement that. So let's just recall, we have this messages.db. This has all of our messages in it, just stored as JSON objects. What I'm going to do is say when they message us, I don't really, let's say recap, we'll say. So when they message us recap, we'll grab all of the messages that belong to our user. Of course, all of them are my user at this point, but that won't be the case always. And we'll just return it to them in a message. Not much of an extension on what we're doing now, which is good. Okay, so we have this inbound message. I'm going to, before we insert the message, we want to check what the message actually was. So let's do that. So if rec.body. What is it? I think it's message. Message, that's right. Message, content, text. Message, content, text. So if that, to lowercase, this is something that has like really had me waste a lot of time before. We want to be case insensitive, just because, you know, some keyboards auto caps the first letter. Easiest thing to do, push the whole thing to lowercase and check it against a lowercase string. So I think we said recap. whatever I said before, it's recap now. And additionally, we probably just want to trim white space as well, just to be on the safe side. So the message they sent in, push to lowercase, trim the white space. If that equals the word recap, we are going to do something. And if it is not recap, then we will insert the message. But let's cover what we'll do when it's recap. Now, what we're going to do here is use an NEDB method called message. What do we call it? Messages. Yeah, messages is our data store. So messages.find, not fund, find. And in here we can put in certain search parameters. I happen to know, because obviously I've gone through this workshop a few times in preparation, if we want to grab nested items, we put them in quotes and we use dot notation. So this is going to grab the from.id. So for any message where the from.id is equal to the value of from.id, I should say rec.body.from.id. So that's all the messages from the user who has just sent us the word recap. So we grab those and we have a callback function. Obviously, the first thing we're going to want to do is handle the errors. So if an error exists, we are going to return. I have this one from earlier. Sorry, there was a problem, quite boring, and return that so it doesn't carry on in the, it doesn't carry on and try and run anything else in the function. Is that correct? Let's think about this. Yeah. Although the fact that this response is down here means if we return up here, we'll never get down here. You know what? I'll figure that out later. So if there's an error, we'll return the error. And if not, because this is the thing we actually care about, we are going to create a new variable called message. This is the message we're going to send to the user. We're going to grab all of the documents. You know what we should do? We should probably just console log the docs and just see what comes back. Yeah. So I'm going to restart this. I'm going to clear this, and I'm just going to restart it like so. And we send in the word recap. Okay, here we are. This was the inbound message. This is the response. It's an array. It has 2 items in it. Fab. And so the text, so we have timestamp. We also have the message content text. So let's, obviously we're not going to just send objects to our end users. That would make no sense if they're not developers. So let's think about it. It's a array. We want to tighten it up. Then we want to turn it into a single string. So we're going to want to use the map in order to go through each of them and kind of neaten them up. We're going to want to return a set of strings. So I'll use backticks here so I can use kind of inline variables, like so. And so for each document, what are we going to want to do? We want to return the individual message, which is stored at doc.message.content.text. And what else is useful? Just for sake of example, we'll also send them the message timestamp. So sent at, and what is it? It's just timestamp. Sent at doc.timestamp. Let's just console log this message again and just see how that acts now. I'm also just going to remove this console log because it's getting a bit busy. There's a lot going on in the terminal, so I'm just going to simplify it a little now. We're going to rerun that and type in recap. Ah, wonderful. So now we have an array of strings. The strings are neatened up, so it just has the text and when it was sent. Again, you'd probably want to do some work just to format these dates or times a bit nicer, but for the sake of this workshop, I'm not going to do that. And if you want to do that, you can go away and do that. Okay, so we have the message. It's an array. We want to turn it into a single string. So then we just want to join each item in the array with 2 new lines, and that will now create a single string where in the final message that gets sent back, they'll look like paragraphs. The first new line just goes to a new line, and then the one after that creates an empty line in a new paragraph. And then we want to send a message. So let's go ahead and do that. So we want to send a message to rec.body.from.id. We want to send it to rec, or other way around, sorry. This is the recipient here. This is who we're sending it to. This is who it's coming from. So rec.body.from.to.id. There we are. And the actual message itself is this nice string we've just created up here in this slightly monstrous line that you should probably break down into a few lines. Yeah, cool. Let's try it out. So I've saved that. Let's restart the application. I'm going to just hide that sidebar so we can see our code as well. Okay. How are you? Oh, all caps. How are you? We're shouting this one. Got it. Thanks, mate. Fab. And then we'll just type in recap and just check that's all worked correctly. Yeah, look at that. Sweet. So, yeah. All right. I'm pretty chuffed that worked. I thought something terrible was going to go wrong. Brilliant. All right, so what have we done here? Let's just kind of, we did that quite incrementally, but over time this complexity built. So let's just take a look at this code base again and just make sure we're happy with it. These lines here just kind of bootstrap the most basic Express application we can, including this last line here, which runs the application on port 3000. And then remember off the side that we have an ngrok instance running, which is looking for port 3000 and making that available via the URL. That URL has two endpoints, inbound and status, which we provided in the dashboard. Then we created a data store using NEDB, which is just this very basic file-based database, which for the sake of a hack possibly could be suitable, but you could obviously use any database you want. We included the Nexmo library. We initialized the library with our API key, API secret, application ID, and our private key, which was generated for us when we created the application. Then we created this send message function, which kind of just makes it easier to send a single message in response rather than having to create all of these objects each time. But this isn't necessary, but I would recommend it. I just think it's a bit easier then later to just call send message with 3 parameters. The status endpoint just exists because otherwise Nexmo will keep hitting our endpoints until it receives something back. The inbound endpoint here will firstly check if the message was recap. In any case, even if there's white space, and if that is the case, it will go to the database, it will find everything from the current user, create one string from it, and then send that string in response. And if they didn't send us recap, we'll store it and tell them that we got it, just so there's some form of response. So let's talk about what you might be. That's the end of just to be clear, that's the end of the technical implementation bit. I'll only be a couple more minutes, so bear with. There are a couple of additional things you might want to do. As I mentioned, you might want to send this off to a more robust database, something that's hosted that doesn't rely on your computer. You might want to, for example, send messages to a translation service and then return a translation or store multiple locales of a message, or maybe when you recall messages you can choose a translation and it can come in the response when you're doing a recap type service. You could use something like Dialogflow to add some I'll call conversational intelligence. I can pick keywords out and understand what you're trying to tell me. I think Dialogflow is a library by Google. Please don't quote me on that. You could hit APIs like, transport APIs or weather APIs, banking APIs in the middle here. So, for example, you could get an inbound message. You could go off and do some work with whatever the person sent you and then come straight back with some data that you have gathered based on their initial message. You could just use this to gather data. You don't need to send anything back. You might want to use this for stuff like Q&A or intelligence gathering, people on the ground. You might want to provide them an easy way of sending you data to your central service. You might consider using something like this for that. And then, yeah, as I mentioned, this kind of messages API can be used with multiple channels. So I've shown you Facebook Messenger because I think it's quite apt for this hackathon and the themes and the kind of people we're trying to reach. But you can also use this for SMS. You can use it for Viber. You can use it for WhatsApp. You can use it for MMS as well in some countries. And as I said, there'll probably be others at some point. But yeah, so hopefully this provides a really good... someone asked me a question. So we could easily use, for example, MongoDB Atlas for storing all of these messages, for example. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, when you think about it, all we're doing is listening for incoming messages, doing something in the middle, and then returning a message back to them. To be frank, like our function started looking like this, and that would be enough. Like that is, we're now getting the inbound messages at rec.body. What you do with it in the middle here is totally up to you. So hopefully that helps answer that question. So yeah, hopefully that was good. That was my first live stream. I think it went all right. You're a very lovely group. Thank you. I will be around in the Slack throughout the whole hackathon. Not the Slack, sorry. I'll be around in the Discord throughout the whole hackathon. I'm here to help. I really want to make sure that things that are built have impact for everyone, not just people who are more technically confident or able. So I no point holding you here just rambling on. So I'm going to stop recording. Yeah, hopefully you found it good. And person who had a problem, I will come message you now. All right, sweet. Speak to you soon.